Begin the current Daf, Mesech Yevamos Daf, Kuf Beis. We begin 7 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara continues the discussion from our previous Mishnah, opening of this paragraph regarding the mitzvah chalitza, which we're speaking about how that, which actually chalitza means to remove, as actually we'll discuss in today's Daf, removing the shoe. What type of shoe is valid for the mitzvah of chalitza? Shiur corresponds to Kazakh and the Cheskel, to Daf Yomi, doing this for today's Daf. Some things discussed in today's Daf are a minal, which is a shoe made with soft leather, versus a sandal, a shoe made with hard leather. Machlekes of minal likatchila, if even initially you're allowed to use a minal or a likatchila, we would say no because we're concerned. Whether the primary obligation of chalitza is to remove his shoe or to reveal his foot. Sounds like a real lumdish question. Usually it happens at the same time, but sometimes there could be a difference, as we'll see in today's Daf. So in our Mishnah we mentioned the following halacha. We said chalitza b'minal, if you did chalitza with a minal, which is a soft shoe, chalitza is ksher, it's a valid chalitza. Then pilya, if you do it with something that's comparable to a sock, chalitza is psula. Now, what's with bisabel? So he said, if it has an akiv, if it has the sole intact and it's kosher, v'she'ela akiv, if he said the sole is missing, then pasuk mean valid. So now our Gemara continues on regarding sandal and minal, what the halacha is regarding these shoes for chalitza. So 7 lines down the top of the Yomid Daf, Kuf Beis. Omer Rabba, Omer Rav Kana Omer Rav. It says, Im Yovel Yov B'Yonah. The Leonah is going to come and tell us, Choltzen b'minal, that you do chalitza with a minal, Shomelei. We would listen to him. Ein Choltzen b'sandal, if he would tell us that you don't do chalitza with a sandal, Ein Shomelei, we wouldn't listen to him. Shekran no go on b'sandal. The custom of the people is already to use a sandal for the mitzvah of chalitza. Rabbi Yisvam Rav Kahana Merav, he has a different version of Rav Kahana Merav. He says, Im Yovel Yov B'Yomer, Ein Choltzen b'minal. Not like the first version had it, if he's going to come and tell us that there is. If he's going to come and tell us that you don't do chalitza with minal, shoymalai. He also says that we would listen to him, but we listen to him that we don't do chalitza with minal. And ein chalitza b'sandal, that's the same halacha like the first version. Ein shoymalai, we wouldn't listen to mishikran no go b'sandal. Everyone has already been using a sandal the mitzvah chalitza. So he says, my now, what's the difference between them? Meaning, they're both telling us if Eliana would come along regarding a minal. The first version has that we would listen to him if he tells us that you do chalitza with a minal. Second version says that if he tells us you don't do chalitza with a minal, we would also listen to him. So what's the difference? So it says the Yomik, the difference between them is minal l'ketchila. Rashi says it in Menachos is that according to the one that says if Eliyahu is going to come and tell us that you do chalitza with a minal, we'll listen to him. That man da'amar, that version obviously holds that currently a minal l'ketchila not. Until Eliyahu would come along and tell us that you do chalitza with a minal. Whereas according to one that says if Eliyahu comes and tells us you don't do chalitza with a minal, we will listen to him. The inference is that up until Eliyahu comes and tells us that not to do chalitza with a minal, that we would do chalitza with a minal. So that is the machlekes between these two different versions of Rav Kana Merav. If initially everyone agrees it would be valid, question is if we use a minal, again which is a soft shoe, for chalitza or not. So the Gemara explains. Well, the mandam of l'ketchila, according to the one that says, meaning Rabbi Yosef's version, that said that one is allowed to initially even use a minal, what's nan? How can you say that? Well, we learned in our Mishnah the following halacha. We said cholza b'minal. We said if he did chalitza with a minal, chalitza ksher, the chalitza is valid. Now that wording of cholza that ksheira sounds like di'evidin. Sounds like if you did, it's going to be valid. But l'ketchila initially not. That sounds like the other version of Rabbah. Eliyahu is going to come and tell us that you could do it. Oh, okay, we'll listen to him. But up until then, we don't initially use it. So, but according to Rabbi Yosef, look, it's really, what's the wording of b'di'evid in our Mishnah? So the truth is what? The truth is even initially one is allowed to use a minal, like Rabbi Yosef said. But I did the Mr. Sefer once. We wanted to say the halacha in the Sefer, which was a different halacha in our Mishnah. It said ben pili. If you use a shoe made out of fabric, what we call a sock, chalitza psula, chalitza is going to be invalid. That halacha is definitely di'evid. We have to say if you did use it, it's not going to be valid, which is even after the fact. So non-migration di'evid. So also when we said what is kosher, which is a minal, we use the terminology of after the fact, but really the halacha of minal is even going to be like a tchila. It's not a difficulty on Rabbi Yosef. Now, however, the Gemara does point out that a minal like a tchila, this machlekes we have between Rabbi Yosef and Rabbah, if you could use a soft shoe initially for chalitza, is actually tanoi. The machlekes of Aram is a machlekes tanoi. The time of the brayso. Amar Rabbi Yosef says, "Pamachas alachti leNetzivim." One time, I went to this place in Netzivim. Matzasi zaken echad. I found the elder yid. Amarti la'etetim kumat baki b'Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser. Do you know very well Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser? Amalei. He says, "Hen yes." He says, "Val shulchani hu tader." He's always on my table. Well, like today's reading from the Yerushalmi, the gear says Shulchani Hayisi Be'iri, meaning he was a Shulchani. Maybe there's a mate, the way our gear has it, that he'd always be by my table. So is it Klumri Yisa Shachaltz Yevamos? Did you ever see him do chalitza with Yevamos? Amar, he says yes. Yisa Shachaltz Yevamos, saw him do chalitza many times. So he says, B'minal lebesandal. Did he do it with a shoe, a soft leather shoe, or with a sandal, a hard leather shoe? Amali, so he said to me, this zaken, chichaltz in the minal? Or do you think you do chalitza with a minal? Now we have in parentheses, but Torah says, na'aloi, that it has to be, says the pasuk, that she removes na'aloi ma'al ragloi. Na'aloi means v'loi min aloi, which Rashi says not to have that girsa, because there is no such word minal in the whole Torah. Like you're saying, it says na'aloi, and it doesn't say minal. It doesn't, there is no such biblical word of minal. There is only na'aloi. Like it says, sha'al na'alecha ma'araklecha, sholafish na'aloi, in Rus, which that word na'aloi actually could be interpreted both for a sandal and a minal. Because Rashi says the word minal is actually a rabbinic word, and na'al is the biblical word. And therefore, Rashi says that not to be garish to parentheses. And this that we say that minal l'ketchil is aser is not learned out from a pasuk of na'aloi v'loi min aloi. It's rather, as the Gemara is going to tell us later on, because of a gezeira. I says Rashi, there is a pasuk in the Torah in the Ram Gimel Barzel u'nuchayches min olecha. Says Rashi, that's not from the word of minal of shoe. That's a word of minal of a lock and a bolt. But there is no such biblical word of minal, so therefore they take out the girsa, Rashi and Taisus, not to have this girsa. But be that as it may, the Zaken said back, he says, what are you asking me if you ever did with a minal? What, you think you could do with a minal? So I said to him, what do you mean? And if that's the case, if you held that you can't use a minal, a soft shoe, what did Remeir see fit? Said this Rabbi Yasi to the Zaken Echad in the Tzivin, that Remeir said if you did chalitza with the minal, it's going to be valid chalitza. And more than that, Rabbi Yaakov and Mishmai, he said in Remeir that actually chalitza with minal is chila. So don't tell me what am I asking if you do a sandal minal. Rabbi Yaakov's version of Meir holds that you could even do it likatchila. If you just noticed in that narrative, we had a machlokes if the halacha of minal is b'diavad likatchila. There's two versions in Remeir. The first version has it that he says Remeir held chalitza sikshay, which is lashon b'diavad, and the second version, that of Rabbi Yaakov, held that you can do likatchila. That's the machlokes Rabbi Yosef and Rambo. Is the machlokes in these two versions of Remeir if it's likatchila or only b'diavad if you could use a minal. Okay, so the Gemara wants to explain now. According to the first version of Remeir, the one who says likatchila loy, that initially one should not use a minal, my time, what's the reason? Because we said that learning from the pasuk that we have in the parentheses is not true. So what's the reason? So the Gemara says, Ilay misham, if it's because the havya panta, the top of the shoe is what's called me'al. If the pasuk says that the woman has to remove it, me'al ragloi, from on his feet. Now, the problem is if you're going to use a minal, and this is what the Gemara is entertaining, is that there's a few different parts of the shoe. The panta is the top part of the shoe. That would be me'al. When you're taking off that panta part, that's what's on top of the foot. That would be that removing it me'al ragli. The problem is va'araksa. There's these straps of the shoe which doubles over the ears of the shoe, the opening. It's essentially what it is. It's like two shoes, one on top of the other. So when you have a shoe, think of a sneaker, you have a shoe, and then you have these straps that go over it. So if you're taking off those straps, that's not really me'al ragloi. That's really me'al, because the panta, the top part is on top of the foot, and then you have the straps on top of that. Now we're concerned, in contrast, as Rashi points out, this is only for a minal, a sandal. They don't tie and double over straps on the ears of the shoe because it's a hard leather. And the straps wouldn't be able to keep it tightly pressed. It wouldn't help. You know, these hard leather, it's not really going to help. It is what it is. But by the opening of the shoe, there is like a knot which narrows the opening. But there's no straps. But by the minal, there are. So the problem is that's me'al de me'al. The woman's going to be undoing the straps. That's not taking off me'al ragloi. That's from what's on top of his foot. The Torah says that she should take off na'aloi me'al ragloi, below me'al de me'al. Now what's on top, and therefore we don't want you to use a minal. So the Gemara says that can't be the reason because that's the case of David Namaloi. Then even after the fact, it shouldn't be valid with the minal because it's me'al de me'al. Because you're never taking off what's on top of his foot. You're taking off what's on top of the top. So obviously, from the fact that we say that after the fact that chalitza is going to be kosher, obviously, all we need to have is that you're going to reveal his foot. And even if you have two shoes, one on top of the other, when you take off both, so that's okay. Like the Gemara is going to say later on, when it talks about two shoes, one on top of the other, the whole question is, only if you're tearing off the upper shoe and you're removing the lower shoe. But if you're removing both shoes, that's going to be okay. So then what's the problem with the minna? You're telling me that because you're undoing the straps, okay, do the straps, then you take off the shoe. So that's not a problem. It's like two shoes, one on top of the other. By taking off the top one, then with the bottom one. So the Gemara says you're right. The concern rather is it's a gzeira, the rabbanan mishum min al merupet, because we're concerned that the shoe might be torn on the top. If it's torn on the top, it's not really a na'al. It's not really a shoe, because since it's soft leather, that even though it's torn, it could still stay on the foot through the straps, but it won't really be a na'al anymore. In contrast, a sandal, which is hard, it won't stay on the foot once it breaks, and therefore there's no reason to be geyser by a sandal. By a minnow, we could have such a concern if we don't want you to use a minnow. Of course, but the evidence could be okay. It's only zera concerned because if it's torn, but the evidence is going to be okay. Or inami, our concern is something similar, like for half a shoe, which again, if it's not going to be a full shoe, again, a sandal, half shoe won't stay on your foot. But a minnow where it's like soft leather, you could tie it and wrap it or whatever. So we're concerned for a half a shoe. Therefore, we're geyser specifically by a minnow. That's the reason why the man the Amar holds likatchila minnow not. The Gemara continues with related that Amar Rav, he says ilav dechamiti lechabivi. Said if not that I saw by my uncle the chalatz besandal the islay shnitzen that he did chalitza with a sandal that had straps, and therefore it made it easier to take off the shoe, I would not have done chalitza like that. I would have only used the sandals of the merchants. The mahadik tray, which is tighter. And again, the whole point is she has to be removing it. We don't want it to slip off and to make it that she's doing the cholza. And he says, and that which is by ours, although that there is a knot tied by the opening, and it keeps the foot on the shoe on the foot, that it doesn't come out. Even so, during chalitza, Katrina Be Misna, we actually tying a long strap, so that she should come along and untie it and then take it off. The Taba Chalitza, a grace Maisa Chalitza. We need to have that she's going to be untying it and taking it off. If we want to make sure it's very, very tight on this foot, so that she's really getting all the taking off, not that it falls off without her doing the Maisa. Now the Gemara brings a simon and a manik for the following three rulings of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Is hataras, release, yevama, sandal, up to sandal. So the Gemara brings three teachings. I'm going to be here to hataras, that's the first one, yevama l'shuk. What permits the yevama to marry someone else, meaning through the ma'aseh chalitza, is b'shmitas roiv ha'ekev. If she went and she removed most of the heel from the shoe, even though she didn't take off the whole shoe yet, she's really permitted to marry someone else. If someone as she's doing the chalitza, this guy's waiting for her to be permitted, and Bezdin, he's running to get her married, and he gives her a ring. She's permitted already after even if she only removed the shoe from the majority of the heel, that's going to be valid. But Meisvah, the Gemara asks for the following brisa. Brisa says, first it mentions a different halacha, that hutru ritzu is minul b'sandal. If let's say the woman didn't untie the straps, rather they got untied by themselves, the straps of the minal, the soft leather shoe or the hard leather shoe, or he, the man, the yavam, he took off the shoe from most of his foot, and then she just finished off the ma'aseh chalitza. So in these cases, the chalitza subsula, the chalitza is going to be invalid. Okay, says the Gemara, but it sounds like time of the shaman. It's because he removed the shoe. Hasham tehi. But if she removed the shoe, then we're saying chalitza is going to be valid. Now it sounds like only because it's roi v'regel in, because if it's most of the foot, but just most of the heel would not be enough. Like we see that because he did, it's a problem. If she does, it's okay. But what is the case we're saying if she does okay? If it's most of the foot, because that was the case of Shomad Rei V'Regel. So it sounds like you need most of the foot. So it's Gemara like, no, Hainu Rei V'Regel, Hainu Rei V'Ekev. Most of the leg is most of the heel. But my call Rei V'Regel. Why are we saying it's most of the foot? Because the Kula Chele Likara, all of the strength of the leg, aleh dachas, it's all pressing on the heel. We know the heel spurs, we know that it's all relying on the heel, therefore we call it reva regel, but really means reva ekev, that itself would be enough to be the Maisa Chalitza. Now, parenthetical, once we mentioned the first half of the Brisa, the Gemara says Misayele. The first halacha of the Brisa, which is not why we brought him in the second part to ask from, but from the first halacha, which we said that if the straps get untied, that's not going to be valid because the woman has to untie the straps. Well, that supports the Rabbi Yana. Because Rabbi Yana says, Bein shehitahu b'shamtehi, whether he untied the straps and she took off the shoe, or Bein shetirahi b'shamahu, whether she untied the straps and he took off the shoe, chalitzas p'sul, the chalitz is going to be invalid. Ashatatehi b'tashmahi, until she unties the straps and she takes off the shoe, she has to do both those maisim to be a valid maisa chalitza. Now, but Bayer Rabbi Yana, however, did have a question. Kura'atuhu mahu. What's halacha if she didn't take it off the shoe, she tore it off him? Or sadaftahu, or she threw like a coal on the sandal, which was wrapped around his foot, and then burnt it. Now, what's halacha? Would that be valid? Now, what's the question? So Gemara explains. It's like in the understanding of the objective of chalitza. Do you say galui karabin va'ika? The taking off the shoe is just a prerequisite, but the primary objective we want is that his foot should be uncovered, and you have that. She tore the shoe, she burnt the shoe. Like the machalitza bin the maybe no. It's the act of taking off the shoe and not having him without a shoe. And Malaka, you don't have that. I guess so. People that says it's not clear. Which interesting question. What is the primary objective of the chalitza? Is that the taking off of the shoe, or he should be without a shoe? And that would be the difference if she actually took it off, or if she burnt it or tore it. Similarly, the Gemara says, "Blame near Mechemi Merabah." Mechemi asks from Rabba, "Shneim on zal gavzel."
It says the cholz of Nahali.
Right.
So it clearly says the cholz.
Right, but what is that? Is that because we want her to take it off, or he should be without? She has to cause him to be without a shoe.
Therefore,
I'm saying, what do you want her to write? She should make him be without a shoe. Yeah, I hear it, maybe, but that's what I'm saying. Is it the gav and the chetz? Is it the ma'isa or the teitzah? Like, what is it? That seems to be the Gemara's question. Now, so the Gemara says, "Shneim and olam zeh gav zeh mahu." What's halacha? They have two shoes, one on top of the other. So the Gemara says, "Hey chadama, what's the case talking about?" If it told where she removed the upper shoe and he has the lower shoe, so what's that going to help? Torah says he has to take the shoe that's off his foot, not the one that's on top of it. Well, it's not going to help if he took off the galoshes and he's remaining with the shoe because it's got to be the one right on top of his foot. So no, I'm asking like this: the kirati le'iloi, she tore off the upper shoe. Like Rashi was medayik before, that he says, well, obviously if the Gemara is saying you tore the upper one, because if you took up the upper one, then the lower one, that would be okay. That's why the minal, we say it's going to be okay also, because if you tie off the straps, even if the straps is on top of the shoe, that's okay. But we're saying, no, you tore off the upper shoe, just tore off the galoshes, then she took off the lower shoe. But the thing is, she didn't take off, she tore the upper shoe so she can get to the lower shoe, but she didn't take off the galoshes. What's the halacha? Chalitza bin va'ika, do you need the ma'isa chalitza? The ma'isa here, she did the ma'isa, she took off the lower shoe. Like the magului karabin maleko, maybe you need to have that the foot should be uncovered, and you don't have that because the galoshes are still on the foot. So here it's the opposite. Here you did the ma'isa chalitza, but you don't have the teitzah of his foot being uncovered. So the Gemara continues on the base and says, "Mika kagavna, is there such a thing?" So there's a question exactly what the question is. Of is there is such a thing that that it sounds like that the way Taisi explains that it's not normal for people to have two shoes. Gemara says yes. The Chazir Rabban Rabbi Huda, the rabbis or Rabbi Huda did nothing bechamsha zuzi, or like they explain, it means zugi, like 5 pairs of muki of shoes, which Rashi says these are Colossians. It sounds like galoshes a little bit maybe, but they're hard. And in Arabic, they call these shoes almak, like from the word muki. And he would walk out with l'shuka, 5 pairs of shoes, so it could happen. And therefore our question is, what would the halacha be if you, and the Gemara doesn't answer that question, which again is based on the same question, which was tekura. The second teaching of Amar Rabbi Merav is Yevamos Daf ben Achim. You have, what happened is that this girl let's say, was an orphan. And then she grew up, meaning her husband died young, and she stayed with her in-laws. And she was a young girl, and she grew up in the Achen amongst the brothers. And no one ever did Yibum. So on that says the Rabbi Shloimy, she permitted to get married to one of the brothers. What's the chiddush? We're not going to say that maybe one day this guy came home from work from the fields. And he said, I'm so tired, I can't get my shoes off. She's like, don't worry, I'll help you get your shoes off. She unties the shoelaces and she takes up the shoe. Chalitza! You just did chalitza. I'm saying this woman she got widowed from her husband at a young age, and she's there with the whole family. All day they work in the fields, and they come home, and then maybe she took over the shoe. Says no. So that says al halacha. So says the Gemara, Tamid lechazina. It sounds like what Rabbi was saying, that because we never saw her take off the shoes, hachazinan. But if we did see that she took off one of their shoes, cheshina, we because maybe it's chalitza, which makes her invalid to them, even though obviously she's not intending to do the mitzvah of chalitza. That's what it sounds like from his halacha. Hamas Batanel in the Brisa that says, Ben Shin Niskaben Hu, Blin Niskaben He, whether he's intending to do chalitza and she's not intending to do chalitza. Or Ben Shin Niskaben He, or whether she's intending to do chalitza, Blin Niskaben Hu, he's not intending to do chalitza. Chalitza is a psula, it's an invalid chalitza, until both of them are intending for the Ma'aseh of chalitza. So what's Rabbi Rav saying? He's saying, we're not concerned that maybe she took up the shoe. Well, and if she did take up the shoe, they went ice skating and whatever, she's getting taken up the shoe, what's going to happen then? Then they're going to be asked to do yibum, but no one had in mind to do chalitza. So he must says in Hachikama. What Rabbi Rav was saying was, no, avagav de chazina. Even if we do see that she took up the shoes, ein chayshish and shemekivnu, we're not concerned that maybe that they had a mind for Ma'aseh chalitza, and therefore she'll still be able to do yibum with one of her brothers. That's one version. Another version has it, that Vikad Ami, that yes, most definitely. The reason is because we never saw her take off any of their shoes. Yes, like we made the dig from Yehuda Rav. If we did see her ever take off the shoes, we're concerned that maybe they had in mind and they become invalid by taking off the shoes. Maybe when they should take off the shoes, she says, maybe I'm done with this family, I'm just taking off the shoes. And he's like, maybe we're done with her. Maybe. But we said in the Brisa that we need to have that they have kavanah, which, as Tais explains, that sounds like that, meaning we need to know that they're intending for chalitza. That's only to permit her to get married to someone else. That she's not a problem about Yevamos Daf. But yes, to the brother, she actually will be puzzled because of the fact that she took up the shul. We are concerned that maybe they had a mind for a ma'aseh of chalitza. That was the second halacha. The third halacha of Amr Rab, which was the word sandal from the mnemonic, was hataras yevama sandal, is sandal hatava b'pishin. If you have a hard leather shoe that's stitched with linen in the chotzenboy, you cannot do chalitza with it because it has to be totally out of leather. Then alech tachash, which is what you see from here, is that it's not called a nal until it's totally made out of leather, like the tachash animal. So it says, wait a second, if that's the source of the pasuk of what a nal is, Raymond then say tachashin, which is one time in history that they had this tachash midachrini, but anything else, the leather of any other animal or a sandal, loi would not be valid. So the Gemara says no, because nal riba, it has the word nal more than one time. To be marba, other types of na'alim. So the Gemara says nal riba. If the word nal is a riba, I feel like calling it then even everything, even linen stitches should be okay. The Gemara says no, you can't. If that's the case, tachash ma'anilei. Then what are we gaining by saying tachash? Meaning, obviously, the banelech tachash come to exclude something, and therefore, but it's being included now, so it's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's going to be like tachash, which is leather, but it doesn't have to be specifically that tachash. Now, boy minei Rabbi Loz asked from Rav, let's say hushal ar. Let's say, okay, the shoe's made out of leather, but the straps are shalsad, but they're made out of the goats here. Now, what's the halacha? So Malay says to him, Mili Karin and Bay, wouldn't we call it, if it had here V'na'olech Tachash, that I'm going to shoe you with Tachash, because the Tachash also has wool. So they want to say, if that's the case, Kulushal Sarnami, then you should be able to make the whole shoe out of wool and not just out of leather. So the Gemara, who krakamiti? Like the Namuka Yosef explains, Gillian brings, that Kraka was a type of shoe which had its own name. So yes, you could have some here like the straps. You could have wool for the straps. But to make it totally out of wool, you're right, the tachash has not only skin, which is leather, but also has wool, which is its hair. But if you made it totally out of the hair, it would be called kraka, and not now, and therefore, okay, you could have the straps made out of wool, but not the whole shoe. Now, the Gemara explains, Amar Rav Kahan L'Shmuel, that the whole halach of chalitza, which comes from the word b'cholza nalim ha'raglei, which means to take off the shoe, the Gemara asks on that whole idea as it is. Where do you know that the pasuk in the Bible that says b'cholza nalim ha'raglei, that she has to do chalitza of his shoe from on his foot, means mishlavu, means to take it off, because the Chsiv, it says the pasuk in Yikra, it says v'cholza zavan mashabem anega, that they remove the stones that have on them a nega from the house that has a nega. So you see the word chalutza means to remove. It says the Gemara, Ve'ema maybe say zuruzihu. Maybe it means preparing, meaning that she takes it from the ground and that she actually ties the shoe on his foot. The opposite. The Chsiv, it says the pasuk in Midbar, Hicholtzu mi'itchem anash matzava, which sounds like it says prepare from you men for the army. It doesn't take no taking off over there. So maybe actually b'choltz nalim ha'ragloi is actually put the shoe on, prepare it that it should go on his foot. So the Gemara says no. Hasanam they're also shlufim mebesa lekrava. Actually, their hichaltz actually does mean remove. It means remove the men from their house to go to the war, to go fight. So hichaltz meitchem is to remove from you. It says it says a pasuk in Eiv says that yichalitz ani ba'anya, which sounds like it's saying that he supports the pauper in the state of poverty. So Rashi says it's really the same word of ziruzi that we said, meaning support him and give him strength, prepare him. So the Gemara says no, here also it means shlufi, it means removing. It means beschar anyai, with the reward of his poverty, which is atones for him in his lifetime, yichaltzu. So it's going to remove and save him midina shel Gehenna, from the judgment of Gehenna. So the pasuk of yichalitz ani ba'anya actually means we're removing the pauper from his poverty, which is his dina shel Gehenna. So the Gemara has another question. Allah said, what do you do with the pasuk in Tehillim? It says chayna malach Hashem sablerev. Hashem rests, the angel of Hashem rests around those who fear him, v'yichaltzim, which the Gemara assumes v'yichaltzim means to say that he's going to, again, Allah Zuz is going to support them, that he's going to give them energy. So says the Gemara, no, here also, the shiur and the reward of those who fear him, yichaltzim medin shel Gehenna, he's going to remove them from the judgment of Gehenna. So it means, again, removing. So the Gemara said, what do you do with the pasuk in Yeshaya? It says about Meisayach Yachlitz, that your bones will be Yachlitz. Which, what does this mean? V'amar Belaza says, Zum Ulish Brachas. This is from the best of all the blessings, because V'amar Rabbi says, Zaruzi Garmi. It gives strength for the bones. So you see that Yachletz means supporting and not removing. So the Gemara says, and you're right. Mash Mahachi, Mash Mahachi. The word Chalitza can mean both to remove and it can mean preparing and supporting. But the Hacha over here, Isaac is Ruzu. If you were thinking to say the pasuk of what we call Chalitza with the Yevamot, would mean preparing and supporting. And that's the case. Like when the Torah should have written the Chotz Nalim Birraglei, she should tie on the shoe on his foot. What's me'al ragli, from on his foot? Obviously, it's removing and not preparing and supporting to put the shoe on his foot. So the Gemara says, wait, Ikar Rachman the Birraglei, but if the Torah would have written like the way you're saying, it should have said to put the shoe on his foot. Havamina, I would have thought to say Birraglei in. That it's only on his foot, but on his leg, not. Because therefore the Torah wrote that you take the shoe from on his foot, which if he's saying v'cholza means preparing, means to tie it on me'al ragli, that which is above his foot, to tie that b'shayker. If let's say his leg got cut off, he's a veteran and he lost his leg, and now he has what's above his foot, which is his leg, meaning his shake, which is the thigh, which is the leg, which is the shins, that part of the foot. So that's me'al raglai. So maybe v'cholza now like me'al raglai means tie on the shoe, support the shoe, me'al raglai on the thing that's on top of the foot, because he lost his foot, and it's telling you that it's going to be valid, even that which is above the foot. Says the Goyim Kin, if that's the case, the Torah should have written b'me'al raglai. V'cholza naloi, tie on the shoe, b'me'al ragli, that which is above the foot. My me'al ragle. It doesn't say b'me'al ragle. It says me'al ragle. Shmamina Mishlavu, obviously, it's that to remove the shoe me'al ragle from on his foot, because it was saying to put on the shaykh, it should have been b'me'al ragle, on what's above the foot. So therefore, that's how we know that chalitza means to remove the shoe and not to put it on. Now, regarding the wording of chalitza, Amalei hahu mina l'Ramulil. There's a certain heretic said to Ramulil, Ama the chalitz le'modeh mineh. You are the people that their master did chalitza to them, that he removed himself from them. So like says the pasuk in Hosea, "B'tzaynim of b'karam yelchu levakesh to Hashem." With their flock and their cattle, they go to seek God. Below him, so they're not going to find him. Chalatz mehem, he's removed himself from them. So he's like saying, Hashem did chalitza to you. Amalei, so he said to the heretic, Shaita, you're a fool. Miksev chalatz lahem. You think it doesn't say that he did chalitza to them? Chalatz mehem ksev. It says that he received chalitza from them, from the Jewish people. And he says, V'ilu, if you're going to have Yevamos Daf, if you're going to have Yevama, that she does chalitza to her brother-in-law, meaning that the Yavam receives chalitza from her. Midi mashasha ispe. You think there's any such concern? The only concern would be if he does chalitza to her, meaning she takes off his shoe, not he's taking off her shoe, and therefore there's no such problem about Hashem doing chalitza, because he didn't do chalitza to us, he had from us. The Mishnah said, Ba'ampilya, regarding the sock, chalitza subsula v'chulu. He said, if you remove the sock, it's going to be invalid. Says Gemara, remember that to say that Ampilya lav minalhu, that Ampilya is not a quote unquote minal, it's not a shoe. It's not now. He says, well, you're right. That's what we learned in Mishnah Masechet that ein hatayrim, the one who's doing what's called the trumas alishka, that he takes off from the chambers that they had put in all the money, the shkolm that they collected from the Jewish people, the matzah shekel. Someone comes to take off into buckets, 3 buckets. So the one who's doing the trumas alishka is not nichtas. He doesn't enter to do the truma. Lo b'pargim chafis. He doesn't come in with a garment that has a hem. We don't want to suspect him that he's hiding some money in the hem. Neither does he come in with socks. That's also because of the same suspicion, because you could stick in coins into the sock. I want to tell you that he's not allowed to walk in minal sandal, because like Rashi says, even without suspicion, it would be forbidden. Because you can't come in to the courtyard with a minal and a sandal, because that's a pasuk in Yeshaya that says, Hashem says, who asked us from you to tremble my courtyard? Well, you don't come in with shoes. Fine. But from the fact that it says that I don't have to tell you that a minal sandal you're not enter, the inference is that Ampilya is not a minal. Because if it was included minal, well, I already know you can't come in because it's a minal. Now walk into the Azar with a minal. The fact that for socks, I have to tell you that it's a problem because of chashad, obviously, it's like the deek we're making from our Mishnah, that a sock is not a shoe. The problem is, remember, that it seems to be contradicting the following brisa. Brisa says, Echad minal v'sandal v'pilya. Whether a shoe, a hard leather shoe, or a sock, lo yital ben, a person should not be walking with them on Yom Kippurim, because it's the violation of one of the 5 Inuyim, which is wearing shoes. You shouldn't wear them limit by slabais, not from one house to another house, not from one bed to another bed. So wait a second, apparently, from the Love Yom Kippurim, you see that a Ampilya, a sock, is considered a shoe. So Mabai says, no, the law of Yom Kippurim is not because of a shoe. Socks are not shoes. It's because this bikasisi is because that there's these small pieces of fabric and soft leather with the sock. The problem is because of pleasure. You're not supposed to have einig, that's why you have the Chamish Inuyim. It's not because you're wearing a shoe, right? Socks are not a shoe, but it's because they're very soft and pleasurable. That's why they're problematic. So Rabbi says, what do you think? Having pleasure on Yom Kippurim, if you're not wearing a shoe, do you think that's forbidden? If you tell me that the sock is not a shoe, why would it be a problem? But he would tie a kerchief around his foot and he would go out, even though it was very comfortable. It doesn't have to be you have to be in pain on Tisha B'Av, on Yom Kippurim. You just have to have not wearing a shoe. So Elam Rabbi, the Rabbi gives a different approach to resolve the contradiction. Says Khan over here on Yom Kippurim, when we said that the sock is forbidden, is Vampili Shal Or. Yeah, it's a sock, but it's made out of leather. Oh, so that's what a minal is. Well, a minal is a soft leather shoe. Kan over here in our Mishnah, and regarding by the true Mesalishka that we said in Mesech Shkolim, which we said is not a shoe, is Bampili Shalpeket, is a sock made out of garment. Now, what's significant of a sock made out of garment? That doesn't protect. You know, you walk on a spill or on a nail or whatever, and this day wearing socks, it's gonna come right in. So that's not a null, and therefore that's why regarding the Azara also, there's no problem about coming in with a sock, because it's not. You don't usually walk in mud with socks. So therefore we say the only problem is because chashad when you're doing Trumas Alishka. But a shoe is that you come up with the muddy shoes, and that would be a problem by coming into the Azara. So therefore that resolves the contradiction. Is it a shoe or not? Depends if it's made out of leather or not. It's logical to say how Rab is answering to give such a differentiation, because if you don't say this in explanation of why it's problematic in Yom Kippurim to come in with this, to walk with the sock made out of leather, so it's technically like a shoe, you'd have kasha Yom Kippurim, then you have a contradiction in Yom Kippurim itself. Because the time when the Brisa says, "Lo yitayil adam b'kruka disin b'tech beisa," person should not be walking with this shoe called kruka darkisim, which is this thin shoe that they would tie beneath their thick shoes to protect them from water, which are called the Unterschuh in German. Unterschuh means the undershoe. So a person should not be walking even with this undershoe in his house, but he can walk around with these ampilim. So wait a second, I thought you said you can't walk with ampilim. No, rather says this obviously the way Rava answered. That Khan, the Bryce that says forbidden bampil shal art, talking about that these socks made out of leather. Khan, the one that says it's permitted bampil shal beged, is talking about these socks made out of garments. No, that's exactly like Rava had answered. And telling us, I said to Rava, but Bryce is like Rava, which this is once we bring the whole Bryce. The Bryce says cholza b'minal hanifra. If someone did chalitza with a torn shoe, but it covers most of the leg, or b'sandal nifchas, a hard leather shoe that broke, but shemekavas regel, but most of the foot could go in it, or b'sandal shalsham v'shalsiv, or a sandal made out of rush and bast, which these are hard and they're protective, or b'kav hakiteach, with a person that his foot got amputated. So what they would do is they would make like a form of a leg, and it has a small receptacle where that's where he puts his stump on it, and he doesn't really lean on it. That's what's called a kav. Now, what he uses to support himself when he's walking, so that he has like a shkina, like a type of a cane, a stilt, which is tied onto his thigh, to his leg, meaning not the foot. The foot is off, and he has a crutch for his hands, which is called a kurka. So this kavekiteya, if that's used for chalitza, or b'muk, which is a sock made out of hard felt, which is protective, or b'smichas reglaim, what's the support of the foot? So you have some people that they have to walk with their hands, and they drag their feet. So they would make these supports made out of wood or leather, and they would put their legs that were, let's say, lame, in that. Or let's say bampili shalar, and this is the main reason why we bring in this brisa, which supports Rava. If you went and you used socks made out of leather, so you see that, as we're going to say, that these are all kosher. Obviously, that's like what Rava said, that leather socks are like shoes. So that would be v'chaltzah nal maragli. And v'chalitza nagadol. If, let's say, a woman did chalitza from an adult, as Ketinta with Kokimel Menalo, Bein Oimid, whether he's standing, Bein Yosha, whether he's sitting, Bein Mutter, whether he's leaning, which places has a discussion why you would have thought to think it would be problematic when he's sitting. These are the few different sources why you would think that they would have to be standing. How do you know that even if they're sitting or leaning, or let's say it's just chalitza from a blind man? The chalitza share, that's what we're saying, in all these cases, it's going to be valid chalitza. Avobad. Let's say you have a torn shoe of soft leather, doesn't cover even the majority of the foot. So you have a hard leather shoe that's broken, that you can't even get in most of your foot. Or besmichas hayedayim. You're not removing the smichas haraglayim. You're removing the smichas hayedayim, which is that it would make it for the hands like gloves made out of leather or supports made out of leather, because they would be walking in the mud and they would support themselves in it, and then they would drag their legs. So if you're going to remove his hand supports as chalitza, or bampil yishal beged, or a sack made out of garment, or chalitza from a minor, all these cases chalitza subsul is going to be invalid again. So you see like exactly the chiluk of Rabbi here in the brisa that the sack made out of leather is going to be valid chalitza, because that is considered as now, and the chalitza of a sack made out of garment is not going to be valid because that's not. That's exactly how Rabbi had resolved the contradiction. Thank you, anytime.